Closer to home, John Howard deserves great credit. He has stepped into the ring and called the Albanese government for what they are, lacking in leadership. Now, there were Hamas terrorists murdering people in Gaza, and Albanese and his acolytes, and to his shame, I'm sorry, the new Premier Chris Minns were completely spineless in the handling of this pro-Palestinian protesters, pro-Hamas protesters, who burnt an Israeli flag and chanted anti-Semitic slogans outside the Opera House. These pictures go around the world, and people are asking, what has Australia become? Tony Burke and Chris Bowen, two senior Australian ministers, failed full-throatedly to condemn local anti-Israel screamers and activists who led two rallies culminating at the Opera House. Those pictures, disgraceful, celebrating the Hamas attacks. They were pro-Hamas, this mob. And this utterly incompetent police minister in New South Wales, Yasmin Catley, refused to apologise for police officers telling Sydney's Jewish community to avoid the Opera House, it wouldn't be safe. So an edict to the Jewish community when the same incompetent Labor leaders led an unauthorised protest. These are unauthorised, of 700 people march to the Opera House and throw flares on the steps. John Howard said, when 9/11 occurred, there was unanimity of response. I was in America, Kim Beazley was the leader of the Labor Party, and there wasn't a cigarette paper between us. He completely supported our position. Mr. Howard stated the obvious, quote, this should be the same. Mr. Albanese should make unequivocal statements, as should the Foreign Minister. Instead of that, there's pussyfooting and lukewarm condemnation. And then you've got the New South Wales Attorney General, this is John Howard speaking, Michael Daly, saying everyone should remain calm and stay at home. Mr. Howard said, how can you remain calm when demonstrators are invoking memories of the Holocaust? People remain calm in that, John Howard said. He said, I never thought we'd crumble to this. We need leadership from the top. We aren't getting that at the moment. John Howard, magnificent. He went on. You can have strong views. You can argue about the Middle East. But for people to invoke the memory of the most appalling crime in humanity, the extermination of 6 million Jews in gas chambers, is terrible. John Howard said, it is totally beyond the pale, as far as I'm concerned, to have people chanting those things. He said it's a catastrophic descent from civility that I never thought I'd see. He said there is no room for moral equivalence when you have people murdering babies. Well done, John Howard. We supposedly have a National Security Council comprising the nation's most senior ministers, intelligence and military chiefs, top diplomats. No meeting of the National Security Council has been called by Prime Minister Albanese on the Israel-Hamas conflict, despite 10,000 Australians are in a war-torn country, along with the potential hit to the global economy. No meeting of the National Security Council has been called, and none is scheduled. Beyond belief, this is Labor at its worst. Tony Burke, the Leader of the House, the boss of the Parliament beyond the Speaker, failed to directly condemn a preacher in his own electorate who said he was elated at the murder of Israelis. In Mr. Burke's own electorate in southwest Sydney, a rally took place where speakers described attacks on Israel as an act of courage and resistance. Mr. Burke silent. The Executive Council of Australian Jewry correctly and emphatically said that what took place at the Opera House and in Mr. Burke's electorate, quote, shows a complete lack of leadership when it is needed most. He said, quote, it cannot be that the loudest voices are those calling for Jews to be gassed, while the voices of moderation, peace and tolerance are entirely absent. He said Burke and his colleagues have much to answer for. And then there's Bowen, who failed to make any direct condemnation of Hamas or its supporters in Australia. Consider this. The Opera House, as you know, is one of the wonders of the world, synonymous with Australia. And there were pictures of Australians, allegedly Australians, chanting anti-Semitic attacks like F the Jews and gas the Jews, F Israel, and supporters of Hamas marching in the streets. Where is this police commissioner on over $500,000 a year? Few people even know a name. This is a major crisis for Chris Minns, the new Premier of New South Wales. Who allowed these people to march to the Opera House? Who authorised the Jewish community to be told that their safety couldn't be assured? It is not good enough for you, Premier Minns, who must surely be embarrassed by his commissioner and his police minister, for the Premier to say that, oh, police made an operational decision. Hang on. We are not that stupid. It is not good enough to say, oh, yes, to a rabble supporting a terrorist organisation like Hamas, and then telling the potential victims, the Jewish community, there would be quite significant risk to attend the Opera House. But here's the rub. You have this absolute and utterly out of her depth dope who is the police minister, Yasmin Catley, from up Newcastle way, saying, are you ready for it? Saying the protest was unauthorised without requisite paperwork. Unauthorised without requisite paperwork. Here are Catley's exact words, quote, police did not approve the march. There was no authorisation. As her words, unquote. Well, what group of gutless individuals allowed the march to go ahead without authorisation? So Catley then says of the police that they determined, quote, the best option, these are her words, the best option was to control and manage crowd movements, unquote. And get this, they did that successfully. They did that successfully? Really? If by the government's own admission this march was not approved and there was no authorisation, then get them off the streets or arrest them. Or are we now in a city where if you're militant enough and ideological enough, you can please yourself? An unauthorised march in Sydney of Hamas supporters, the pictures go around the world. What have we become? This was a test, I'm telling you, for Labor leadership, and they failed abysmally. Abhorrent scenes, fireworks and flares lighting up the stairs of the Opera House. And the only person arrested was a bloke carrying an Israeli flag. And the Jewish community are told, oh, you're not safe. What kind of leadership is this? The police commissioner, this Karen Webb, she should be in the dock. The police minister, Catley, should be sacked. And Chris Minns, you should have done that already. Please explain why a man was arrested for carrying an Israeli flag. All you Labor leaderless wood ducks, please explain why protesters supporting a designated terrorist organisation in Hamas were not arrested, when in fact the march was unauthorised. Tell us why no one was charged for shooting a flare, lighting fires, burning an Israeli flag on the steps of the Opera House, and no one's charged. And this dope of a police minister says the crowd was managed successfully. It seemed to me that such a crowd were ideological second cousins to the savages in Gaza. Is it okay, Albanese, Wong, Minns, take your pick, any Labor leader if there is one, is it okay in this country? Let us know immediately for people to be openly supporting terrorist organisations. Is that okay? And that includes children. And we have a useless book of anti-discrimination laws. Yet here on the steps of the Opera House, through the streets of Sydney, was brutal, unapologetic anti-Semitism. And now we're told a pro-Palestine rally for Sunday will not go ahead. Labor as a party are in no end of trouble. The Premier of New South Wales, Chris Minns, has a man in his party, Mark Buttigieg. You've most probably never heard of him. He's the Parliamentary Secretary in the Minns government for Industrial Relations, Work, Health and Safety and Multiculturalism. His 19-year-old son, a student, joined the rally, the marches and the anti-Semitic chanting. It is not being alleged, I must say, that this 19-year-old was involved in any of the incidents at the Opera House. His father, the Labor parliamentarian, said he didn't know his son attended the rally. A pro-Palestinian rally, pro-Hamas, that did not have the correct approvals to take place. And this out-of-her-depth police minister called it a spontaneous gathering. Spontaneous? Are you a dope? Of course you're a dope. Just imagine if this were Peter Dutton's son. This young man, Gerard Buttigieg, is not a nobody in the Labor Party. He has a role within the Australian Services Union. He's the Secretary of Young Labor Left, whatever they are. But as I said, just imagine if this were Dutton's son. This young man should be expelled from the Labor Party. What is this business about the things you walk past are the things you condone? An ALP office bearer, the son of a parliamentary secretary, went to the Opera House and was involved with anti-Semitic racist protests. Come on, Mr Albanese and Chris Minns, what are you going to do? Mark Speakman, the Liberal leader of the opposition in New South Wales, has called on Premier Minns to sack Mark Buttigieg, who's the Multiculturalism Secretary. And Mr Speakman has said, and rightly, as Parliamentary Secretary, he is responsible for making sure culturally and linguistically diverse communities feel safe, protected and embraced. Surely this man and the public position taken by his son condemns his son, or the man himself condemns him. One of them's got to resign, one of them's got to be sacked. No one can control the choices that their adult children make, but you can disown their views, and the father has not done that. Indeed, the Parliamentary Secretary Buttigieg has condemned the opposition leader Speakman for, quote, sewer rat politicisation of his son. The bloke doesn't get the message. To call for a premier, he says, to sack an MP because his teenage son attends a rally is nothing short of sewer rat tactics. Really? No, Mr Buttigieg, it wasn't a rally. This was an anti-Semitic protest supporting a terrorist organisation called Hamas. Do some homework. And your son is an office bearer within the Labor Party. On almost every aspect of this disgraceful behaviour on Monday night, with pictures going around the world, the Labor Party have shown quite clearly that their ideological commitments are not consistent with Australia's national interests. It's long been said on national security that the Labor Party can't be trusted. Well, they had their chance on Monday night and they blew it.